The courtroom was supposed to be calm that morning, routine motions, technical arguments, polite nods of decorum. But that illusion shattered the moment Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett walked through the double oak doors. The sound of her heels echoed with a rhythm that wasn't just about presence. It was a statement. The air grew thick with the kind of anticipation that only comes when two forces of conviction are about to collide. At the bench sat Judge Edith Jones, stern, poised, and rooted in decades of jurisprudence. Her eyes were sharp, her posture commanding. She was known for her exacting standards and her intolerance for grandstanding, a quality that made her both feared and respected in equal measure. Yet even she seemed to sense that today's exchange would be different. Congresswoman Crockett. The judge began, her tone clipped but controlled. You requested special permission to address this court directly regarding your complaint. You may proceed. But I warn you, this is not Capitol Hill. This is a court of law. Jasmine smiled faintly, folding her notes with deliberate precision. Your Honor, I appreciate the reminder. But sometimes the law and the truth need to shake hands, and that doesn't always happen in silence. A murmur swept through the gallery. Crockett's reputation preceded her, fierce, unflinching, and often accused of letting passion bleed into her politics. Yet here she was, not as a politician behind a microphone, but as a citizen demanding accountability. Judge Jones arched a brow. If you're implying that this court lacks integrity, I suggest you reconsider your phrasing. With respect, Judge, Jasmine replied, locking eyes with her, I'm implying that integrity doesn't always look like silence. Sometimes it looks like confrontation, even when it's uncomfortable. That single sentence tilted the entire room's energy. The bailiff shifted nervously. Reporters scribbled. A courtroom clerk glanced up from his notes, sensing that what was unfolding wasn't a standard hearing. It was something meant for history books and viral feeds alike. Judge Jones leaned back slightly, as though measuring the weight of her response. Ms. Crockett, this court operates on evidence, not emotion. Your complaint alleges procedural bias in the review of the evidence submitted to the committee. Is that correct? Partially, Jasmine said. But what I'm truly alleging is the bias that hides behind procedure. The bias that decides who gets heard, who gets dismissed, and who gets labeled angry for daring to speak up. Jones's eyes narrowed. Anger doesn't substitute for argument. Neither does arrogance. Jasmine shot back. Gasps rippled through the room. For a brief second, the judge's lips twitched, not in anger, but almost amusement. Congresswoman, she said, voice tightening, you're walking dangerously close to contempt. Contempt. Jasmine repeated, stepping forward. You think passion for justice is contempt. Maybe that's the problem, Your Honor. Maybe we've mistaken obedience for respect, and silence for order. The courtroom froze. Judge Jones didn't respond immediately. She simply stared, her expression unreadable, her mind visibly calculating. The bailiff took a half step forward, unsure whether to intervene. Then, unexpectedly, the judge let out a small, restrained laugh, the kind that isn't entirely humorless, but far from kind. Ms. Crockett, she said dryly, I see that your flair for performance hasn't dimmed outside of Congress. And then came Jasmine's counterpunch. The line that would dominate headlines that evening. Performance, she repeated softly. Your Honor, if standing up for the truth looks like a performance, maybe the problem isn't the actor, it's the audience. The courtroom reacted like a struck match. Whispers, gasps, a few suppressed chuckles. Even the court reporter looked up briefly, her fingers frozen on the stenograph. Judge Jones's smile vanished. You're out of line, she said sternly. Maybe, Jasmine replied, but at least I'm not out of touch. Silence. A thick, almost electric silence. For a long, tense moment, both women stared at each other. The judge, the emblem of tradition and order, the Congresswoman, the embodiment of rebellion and reform. 2 generations, 2 worlds, 2 kinds of power colliding in the same confined space of justice. Jones finally broke the silence. Ms. Crockett, you came here seeking justice. I suggest you start by respecting the very institution that upholds it. I respect the law, Jasmine said, but not the way it's being used to protect power instead of people. That was it. The spark that turned discourse into duel. The judge leaned forward. You presume too much about this court's motives. And you presume too much about my anger. Jasmine fired back. Maybe my tone isn't what you're used to hearing from someone who looks like me, but maybe it's time you got used to it. A sharp intake of breath from the gallery followed. Jones's hand twitched, as though tempted to gavel the room to silence, but she didn't. Instead, she studied Jasmine, like a professor assessing a student who'd just broken every rule, but revealed a kind of brilliance beneath the defiance. Congresswoman, she said slowly, I have spent 40 years defending the principles that keep this nation's courts impartial. I've seen arrogance from power, and I've seen emotion from the powerless. Neither changes the law, and I've seen how the law changes depending on who's standing before it. Jasmine countered. That's why I'm here, not to disrespect this court, but to remind it that justice isn't supposed to have favorites. The judge's voice softened slightly. Not weaker, but layered with something human. You believe I've been unfair to your cause. I believe, Jasmine said, you've been fair to the system. And sometimes, that's not the same thing as being fair to the truth. That line landed heavy. Even Judge Jones looked momentarily struck, as if something about the phrasing touched a nerve she hadn't acknowledged in years. For the first time, the judge's reply came not as a retort, but a reflection. You think truth and law can be separated. I think they already have been, Jasmine said. Another pause. Another stare. Another shared realization that this wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. Very well, the judge said finally, straightening her robe. Then let's proceed. But if you wish to argue truth, Miss Crockett, you'd better come with proof, not just passion. Jasmine's eyes flashed, not with anger, but with purpose. Then I'll bring both, Your Honor. Because one without the other never changed a thing. The gavel struck once, sharp, resonant. Proceed. Judge Jones ordered, and just like that, the battle lines were drawn, not of politics or power, but of principle and pride. Outside the courtroom, the media vans were already idling. Inside, every word between these two women would soon become part of a much larger conversation, one about justice, gender, authority, and truth itself. As the murmurs faded and the next witness was called, Judge Jones glanced once more at Jasmine, and in that glance was a flicker of something rarely seen from her, respect, tinged with caution. She had laughed at Jasmine once, but by the time this hearing was over, that laughter might come to haunt her. The gavel's echo still lingered when Jasmine Crockett stepped forward, clutching a slim, black binder that seemed far too ordinary for the storm it contained. Every camera in the courtroom tilted slightly, every pen poised. They all sensed it, something about to explode. Judge Edith Jones adjusted her glasses. You may proceed with your presentation, Miss Crockett. But keep your arguments relevant to the procedural issue. Oh, I intend to, Jasmine replied. But relevance depends on whose eyes you're looking through, doesn't it? The judge's brow furrowed, but she didn't interrupt. That was her first mistake. Jasmine opened the binder, revealing several stapled reports and a series of internal memos. These, she said, her voice clear but restrained, are the communications from the Oversight Committee's counsel to the defense team. Messages exchanged before the evidentiary review even began. They show not only foreknowledge of the witness statements, but strategic coordination in how those statements would be framed in the official record. The gallery murmured. The court stenographer looked up, realizing she might be transcribing a political earthquake. Judge Jones straightened. Are you suggesting collusion between the committee and counsel? I'm not suggesting, Jasmine said, eyes locked on the bench. I'm proving. A slow, taut silence stretched. Jones gestured slightly. You'll submit them into evidence. Jasmine smiled. The kind of smile that signals both defiance and control. With pleasure, Your Honor. But if I may, I'd like to read a portion of one message aloud. Judge Jones hesitated. Make it brief. Jasmine began reading, her voice calm but edged with steel. Make sure the Congresswoman's remarks are entered last. By then the tone will appear emotional, less credible. push her to react. It will discredit the statement without us needing to reboot it. The courtroom gasped. Someone in the back whispered, "They plotted it." Another whispered, "She's got receipts." Jones's gavel struck once. Order. But the order didn't return, not really. The energy in the room had shifted. The unspoken realization hung heavy. This wasn't just a hearing, it was exposure. Jasmine placed the memo flat on the evidence table. "Your Honor, I've been called many things in the past year. Angry, aggressive, unprofessional. You know what I call it. Effective. Because the moment a woman like me raises her voice, suddenly the rules of decorum become sacred." "Ms. Crockett," the judge began. "No, Your Honor," Jasmine continued firmly, "you asked for relevance. There it is. These documents show that the very process you defended as impartial was weaponized against dissent." Jones's gaze hardened. "That's a serious allegation." "It's a serious reality," Jasmine replied. "And the problem with reality is that it doesn't wait for permission to exist." The tension in the air felt almost visible. Like two currents of energy, colliding and folding around each other. The judge folded her hands deliberately. "Congresswoman, I'll remind you again that this courtroom is not a stage for political theater. And yet," Jasmine countered, "every ruling handed down in this nation shapes politics, whether you admit it or not. The law doesn't live in isolation. It breathes, and right now, it's choking." A flicker of something passed through Jones's eyes, maybe irritation, maybe reluctant respect. "Then tell me," she said coolly, "what remedy do you seek from this court?" Jasmine paused. For a moment the fire in her tone gave way to clarity. Precise, measured, calculated. Transparency. A public acknowledgement that the oversight process was compromised, and an injunction preventing future procedural reviews from excluding dissenting evidence without cross-party verification. "That's not within the purview of this court," Jones said. "Then what is?" Jasmine asked quietly. "Because if not this court, then where do the silenced go?" That question struck deep, not just to the judge, but to everyone present. Even the bailiff looked uneasy, as though realizing this was more than legal sparring, it was a confrontation with conscience. Judge Jones took a breath. "Ms. Crockett, you've made your point, but law cannot bend every time someone claims moral superiority." "Moral superiority?" Jasmine echoed. "No, I'm talking about moral survival. You think I'm here to grandstand? I'm here to prove that when the process is rigged, silence isn't neutrality, it's complicity." That word, complicity, hit the judge like a bell toll. She leaned back slightly, her fingers tightening on the gavel. For years, she had prided herself on her neutrality, her detachment from politics. But Crockett's words scraped against something unspoken. A private unease she'd long buried under the weight of judicial restraint. "Do you know what it means to sit in this chair?" Jones asked suddenly. "To carry not just the law, but the burden of being its last line of defense against chaos." "Yes," Jasmine said, unwavering. "And do you know what it means to stand here? Knowing that line you defend keeps moving, depending on who's standing before it." The gallery was silent again. Not in boredom, but reverence. This wasn't argument anymore, it was revelation. Judge Jones exhaled slowly. "You assume bad faith where there may be none. And you assume good faith where there's been damage," Jasmine said. "I didn't come here to attack you, Judge. I came here because the system you represent stopped listening to people like me. You laughed once, remember? Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe it was disbelief. But to me it was confirmation that our truths are entertainment until they're undeniable." The judge blinked. "You think I laughed at you?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes. And that's fine. Laughing at the messenger is easier than hearing the message. But look around you. People aren't laughing anymore." A hush fell. The reporters had stopped writing. Even the hum of the courtroom's air conditioning seemed distant. Jones looked down at the documents before her. The memos, the proof, the damning trail of bias hiding behind bureaucratic polish. For a long, silent moment, she seemed older, smaller, less the untouchable figure behind the bench, and more the human being who'd given her life to something that might not deserve blind faith anymore. Then, in a quiet, almost fragile voice, she said. If what you're saying is true, it threatens more than this case. It threatens the court's very legitimacy. Jasmine nodded softly. It's already threatened, Your Honor. I'm just the one saying it out loud. The Joneses' eyes lifted again, and in them was a war. Pride versus truth, legacy versus conscience. You have no idea what you're risking. Oh, I do, Jasmine said. But I'd rather risk my career telling the truth than keep it by pretending not to see it. The line landed heavy, reverberating through the room like an invisible verdict. For once, Judge Jones didn't respond. Instead, she leaned forward and quietly instructed, "The court will recess for 10 minutes. The gavel struck again, but this time it didn't feel like authority. It felt like retreat. As the judge rose, she glanced at Jasmine. Their eyes met for a single second. Two women on opposite sides of the system, yet bound by the same moral gravity. It wasn't anger now, it was something deeper. Respect and fear. Because both knew, the next round wouldn't just determine who won the argument. It would decide who history remembered as right. When Judge Edith Jones retreated into her chambers, the heavy wooden door closed behind her with a sound that seemed to echo louder than any gavel strike. The courtroom outside buzzed with restless voices. Journalists whispering, aides rushing, and cameras being repositioned for whatever was coming next. But inside the chambers, silence ruled. She stood for a moment, staring at the documents Jasmine Crockett had submitted. Pages that now sat on her desk like small, silent accusations. The handwriting on those memos was familiar, too familiar. They bore the signature of someone Jones had trusted, a senior counsel whose integrity she'd once defended on national television. The realization crawled up her spine like ice. Her clerk, a young woman named Laura, entered quietly. "Judge, are you all right?" Jones didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced one of the memo pages. Where did she get these? Public disclosure request, apparently, Laura said. Congresswoman Crockett filed it 3 weeks ago, but the release wasn't acknowledged until yesterday. It's all over the political forums now. Trending, Jones repeated softly, almost bitterly. Since when does justice trend? Laura hesitated. Since truth started competing with entertainment, ma'am. The Jones glanced up sharply, but Laura didn't flinch. The girl was brave, maybe too brave. You've read these? The judge asked. Laura nodded. Yes, and, Your Honor, it looks bad. Jones exhaled slowly, lowering herself into the leather chair. Bad for the committee. Laura swallowed. Bad for you, too, ma'am. They're already calling it the Jones bias. For a moment, Judge Jones didn't move. Her jaw tightened, her expression carefully neutral. The same stoic mask she'd worn through 40 years of trials, appeals, and public scrutiny. But beneath that mask, the pressure was real, pulsing. Outside, the faint murmur of reporters could still be heard through the heavy door. Someone was clearly giving statements. Jones turned her head slightly, almost instinctively, and knew exactly who it was. Jasmine Crockett. In the courthouse hallway, Jasmine stood surrounded by flashing cameras and microphones, her binder clutched tightly against her chest. The bright lights caught the sheen of determination in her eyes. Congresswoman Crockett, a reporter shouted, "Do you believe Judge Jones herself is compromised?" "I believe the process has been compromised," Jasmine said firmly. "And when that happens, everyone inside it, including the judge, has a choice to make. Are you accusing Judge Jones of misconduct?" Another pressed. "No," Jasmine replied, her voice calm but unyielding. "I'm asking her to rise above it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The kind that spreads faster than fire. Some called it defiance, others audacity. But to Jasmine it was neither. It was survival. She'd learned long ago that truth alone rarely changed anything unless it was spoken out loud. Loud enough for the world to hear. As she turned away from the microphones, an aide hurried to her side. "Congresswoman, the party's communications director just called. They want you to tone it down. They're worried about optics." "Optics," Jasmine said, her tone sharp. "They should be worried about ethics. Mom, they think this might hurt the upcoming committee hearings." "Then maybe the hearings need hurting," she interrupted. "If truth's uncomfortable, good." That means it's real. The aide hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty and fear. But Jasmine didn't wait for approval. She pushed through the hallway crowd, her steps steady, her face unshaken. Yet, beneath that steel composure, her pulse raced. She knew exactly how dangerous this was. Taking on a federal judge wasn't a career move, it was a career sacrifice. But she wasn't here for safety, she was here for impact. Back in chambers, Jones poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled, only slightly, but enough for her to notice. It wasn't fear, she told herself, it was the weight of what came next. "Laura," she said quietly, "close the blinds." As the light dimmed, the judge opened her phone, something she rarely did during hearings, and scrolled through the political feeds. Faye Crockett vs. Jones was everywhere. Clips of their exchange were already circulating. The line that had gone viral in under an hour read, "If standing up for truth looks like performance, maybe the problem isn't the actor, it's the audience." Millions of views, thousands of comments, some calling Crockett brave, others calling Jones biased. The judge set her phone down slowly. "We've lost control of the narrative," she murmured. Laura shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, what if she's right?" Jones looked up sharply. "Excuse me. I mean..." Laura's voice softened. "What if the process really was rigged? What if this time neutrality isn't justice?" Jones leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You're young. You still believe justice is clean. It isn't. It's compromise. It's holding the middle line when both sides want to tear it apart." "But what if the middle's already corrupted?" Laura asked softly. The judge's gaze dropped. "Then the law dies," she whispered, "and chaos takes its place." There was a long silence. Then the judge stood, smoothing her robe, said word to the bailiff. "We'll resume in 5 minutes." Laura nodded and left quietly. For a brief moment Judge Jones was alone. Just a woman in a robe. No cameras, no authority, only her conscience. She looked once more at the documents on her desk and whispered to no one, "She reminds me of myself 30 years ago." 5 minutes later, the courtroom filled again. The atmosphere was thick, not just with anticipation, but with something heavier, uncertainty. The bailiff announced, "All rise. Court is back in session." Judge Jones entered, her expression composed but not cold. She sat, eyes scanning the room, and finally settled on Jasmine. "Before we continue," she began, "the court wishes to clarify certain matters raised earlier. The documents submitted will undergo independent verification. Until then, I will refrain from drawing any conclusions." Jasmine nodded. "Understood, Your Honor. But," Jones continued, her tone lowering, "let me be clear. This proceeding has moved beyond its original purpose. You have made serious allegations, not just against officials, but against the integrity of this court." Jasmine stepped forward slowly. "And I'll stand by every one of them, if that's what it takes to force this conversation." Jones tilted her head slightly. "You realize the risk of contempt still stands." "I realize truth's worth it," Jasmine replied. There was a long pause, the kind of silence that doesn't weaken tension, but strengthens it. Finally, the judge leaned forward. "Then I suppose it's time I start asking my own questions." The shift was immediate. Crockett stiffened. The crowd leaned in. "You claim the Oversight Committee engaged in bias," Jones began. "But tell me, Congresswoman, were you not also seeking political advantage in exposing it?" "I sought accountability," Jasmine said quickly. "Which benefits you politically," Jones countered. "Is that not true?" Jasmine hesitated. "The truth benefits everyone, even my critics." The judge smirked faintly. "That's a convenient definition." "Maybe," Jasmine said, voice tightening. "But at least it's honest." The tension was back, razor sharp and electric. Judge Jones nodded slowly. "Perhaps, or perhaps you're simply fighting the system the same way it fights you. With theater." Jasmine took a breath, her eyes narrowing slightly. "If the system listens only to theater, Your Honor, then I'll give it a show it can't ignore." A ripple of whispers swept through the crowd again. The judge's lips pressed into a line. "Then I suggest," Jones said quietly, "you be ready for what comes next, because truth has consequences. For both of us." Jasmine didn't blink. I've lived with consequences my whole life, Judge. What scares me isn't losing, it's pretending. The two women locked eyes again, and in that moment, there was no courtroom. Only two souls standing at opposite ends of the same battlefield, fighting for the same thing from different directions: belief. The gavel struck once, but this time, the sound didn't mark an end. It marked the beginning of something far more dangerous, a reckoning that neither woman could control anymore. The courthouse lights flickered against the evening rain as the last of the spectators drifted out. The air outside still hummed with the electricity of what had just unfolded inside. Two women who had turned the meaning of justice into a battleground. Inside her chambers, Judge Edith Jones sat before a muted television, watching a replay of the day's proceedings. Every major network had it on loop. The caption read, "Crockett challenges the bench, Judge Jones under fire." Jones watched herself on the screen, calm, composed, unmoved. Yet she could feel the tremor beneath that surface, the subtle fracture that had begun when Jasmine Crockett spoke words she hadn't been ready to hear. The door opened without a knock. It was Michael Warren, the chief judicial administrator and her longtime confidant. His expression was grave. "You've made the front page, Edith," he said flatly. "The committee wants a statement. They're worried this will spiral." The Jones muted the television. "Spiral into what, Michael?" "Accountability." He frowned. "You know that's not what this is about. The moment a sitting judge becomes the headline, the judiciary loses control of the narrative. You gave her too much room in there." "I gave her respect," Jones replied. "Something the rest of this town refuses to give anyone who doesn't play by its rules." Michael stepped closer. "Respect is one thing. Letting her accuse the bench of bias on live broadcast, that's another." "She brought evidence," Jones said quietly. "You saw it." He sighed. "Evidence or performance? The public doesn't care which. They just want a villain. And I'm the easiest one to cast," she said, leaning back in her chair. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside grew heavier, streaking across the windowpane like thin silver threads. Finally, Jones asked, "Do you think she's wrong?" Michael hesitated. "I think she's dangerous. She knows how to make truth sound like rebellion, and rebellion always gets applause." Jones gave a dry smile. "Maybe she's what this system needs. Someone to scare it awake." Michael's voice lowered. "Edith, that kind of thinking will destroy you. Don't let her pull you into her storm." But the truth was Jones was already in it, whether she admitted it or not. Across town, in a modest hotel conference room repurposed as a media hub, Jasmine Crockett sat surrounded by her advisors. The walls were plastered with news clips, social media feeds, and screenshots of trending hashtags. One of her aides, Mira, scrolled furiously through her phone. "You're everywhere, Jasmine. Every network, every blog. Some are calling it the Crockett Doctrine. Others say you humiliated a sitting judge." Jasmine leaned back, exhausted but alert. "Humiliated? No, I told the truth. The humiliation belongs to the system that's afraid of it." Mira hesitated. "Still, they're coming for you. The party leadership's nervous. They think you're starting something they can't control." Jasmine's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then they finally understand what justice feels like." Her chief strategist, Devon, interjected. "You need to tread carefully. Tomorrow's hearing isn't about emotion. It's about credibility. They'll try to paint you as a grandstander. If Jones plays it calm, you'll look volatile." Jasmine looked up sharply. "I don't perform volatility. I respond to hypocrisy." Devon didn't argue. He'd seen this fire before. It was what made her unstoppable, and also what made her enemies dangerous. Then Mira looked up from her screen again, her face pale. "You need to see this." She turned the phone toward Jasmine. A short, grainy audio clip was circulating online. A leaked conversation between two committee officials. "If she pushes the memo angle again, the judge will shut it down. We've got assurances." From Jones herself. Indirectly. "She's one of us. She understands what's at stake." Jasmine's heart pounded. It was barely 30 seconds long, but it was dynamite. The implication was clear. A backdoor deal, real or fabricated, it didn't matter. In politics, perception is proof. Devon cursed under his breath. Who leaked this? Myra shrugged. No idea. But it's spreading like wildfire. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She didn't want this. She wanted justice, not chaos. But now the narrative was out of her hands. She finally said, "We verify it. If it's real, it goes into the record. If it's fake, we expose whoever planted it." Either way, Devon said quietly, the judge is cornered. Jasmine looked down at her notes, her reflection staring back from the polished table. "No," she said, "we both are." Back in her chambers, Jones's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have played along. The tape's out now. Good luck keeping your reputation." Her stomach sank. The tape. Michael entered moments later, face ashen. "It's bad, Edith. Someone released an audio clip implying you're politically compromised." Her eyes hardened. "It's a lie." "Maybe, but the court of public opinion won't care." Jones rose, pacing. "They're trying to pit me against her? Make it a spectacle." "It already is," Michael said. "You need to address it tomorrow before she does." But Edith wasn't listening anymore. She was thinking about the trap she might have walked into, about the world outside this courtroom that no longer cared for nuance, only sides. "She'll think I'm her enemy," she whispered. "But the real enemy is whoever needs us divided." That night, both women lay awake in different corners of the same city. One staring at the ceiling, haunted by what she'd built. The other staring at her phone, haunted by what she'd dared to challenge. The rain fell harder, washing the streets clean. But not the truth. Because tomorrow, they would meet again. Not as judge and congresswoman, but as two unwilling symbols of a nation split between authority and defiance. And as both prepared for the next day's hearing, neither realized that what awaited them wasn't just a verdict. It was revelation. Morning light sliced through the courthouse windows, illuminating the tension that hung thick in the air. Reporters crowded every hallway, microphones like bayonets, ready to stab the silence the moment something broke. The headline running across every screen read, "THHH Soke Teachben CH. JUGGUNDR fire inside courtroom B." Both women took their places. Judge Edith Jones, composed but visibly strained, a porcelain calm over a battlefield heart. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, resolute, eyes sharp, every breath a statement of defiance. The gavel struck once, and silence rippled like a shockwave. Jones began slowly. "Before we proceed, I must address the unauthorized recording circulating online. It implies impropriety within this court's deliberations. Let me state clearly, I have never, nor will I ever, conspire to suppress evidence or favor any political interest." Her voice was steady, but even she could hear the tremor underneath. From the public gallery, someone whispered, "That's what they all say." And the murmur spread like wildfire before the bailiff restored order. Jasmine rose from her seat. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the people have a right to transparency. The leak, whether authentic or fabricated, demands investigation. And if this court is truly impartial, then let us open the doors fully. No sealed records, no hidden testimonies." Jones's eyes locked on hers. "Congresswoman, you speak of transparency as if it were a weapon." "Sometimes," Jasmine said, "it has to be." A hush. Then, Jones leaned forward slightly. "And what happens when your weapon cuts too deep? When truth becomes spectacle and justice becomes collateral?" Jasmine met her gaze. "Then maybe justice was never as sturdy as we thought." The courtroom buzzed. Each word felt like a spark over dry kindling. The chief committee moderator, Senator Alden Reeves, cleared his throat. "Both of you are here not to exchange philosophy, but to determine the admissibility of the Crockett evidence memo. The infamous document, a 42-page dossier Jasmine claimed revealed judicial bias within funding allocations for minority communities, sat on the table between them like a ticking bomb." Reeves continued, "Judge Jones, you may question the Congresswoman." Jones stood, her black robe whispering against the marble floor. "Congresswoman Crockett, under oath, can you confirm the authenticity of the so-called memo? Did you verify the source independently?" Jasmine's voice held steady. "Cross checked every figure with the Department of Grants and Equity. The source came from an internal whistleblower. Someone who risked their career to show the bias your bench has overlooked. Overlooked. Jones repeated, or corrected according to law. Jasmine shot back. If the law itself is built on exclusion, correction becomes complicity. The words hit harder than she expected. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated for a beat. Jones inhaled deeply. You accuse this institution, my bench, of discrimination. Yet you base your claim on a single anonymous source. No, Jasmine said firmly. On patterns, on outcomes, on decades of silence. Jones tilted her head. And do you include yourself in that silence, Congresswoman? You've been in office for years. Where was this crusade before the cameras arrived? A murmur rippled through the gallery. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Don't mistake timing for convenience. I came forward when I had proof, not when I had ambition. Or when it became popular. Jones countered softly. That line cut deep. Too deep. Jasmine's temper flickered. Popular. You think it's popular to stand alone against power? To watch colleagues distance themselves because they fear retribution? Jones stepped closer. You're not standing alone. You're standing in front of people who believe their anger is justice. That's dangerous. Maybe it's necessary. Jasmine shot back. When authority hides behind civility, rebellion becomes moral. The gallery erupted again, half cheering, half gasping. Reeves struck his gavel repeatedly. Order, order in this chamber, but control was slipping. This was no longer a hearing. It was an ideological collision. Jones's eyes softened. You remind me of myself 30 years ago, she said quietly, almost to herself. I thought fury was a substitute for patience. But the law bends for neither. Jasmine frowned. And what did you learn, Judge? That sometimes justice isn't loud, it's deliberate. Jasmine's response came with fire. And sometimes deliberate is just another word for delay. Another explosion of whispers. The court cameras zoomed in on Jasmine's face, catching the gleam of tears she refused to let fall. Jones paused. Something shifted in her, an almost imperceptible surrender to empathy. Congresswoman, she said after a long silence, you've accused me of bias. I could dismiss your evidence on procedural grounds. I could question your motives. But I won't. The room froze. I won't, Jones repeated, her tone soft but sharp as glass. Because despite everything, despite your accusations and my defense, I believe your pursuit of truth, even reckless, comes from integrity. So let's put that integrity to the test. She turned to the clerk. Release the sealed documents. Every communication related to the funding allocations. No redactions. The courtroom gasped. Even Reeves looked stunned. Judge Jones, he stammered, it violates comfort. She interrupted. Not justice. Jasmine blinked, caught between disbelief and admiration. You'd do that? Risk your own credibility? Jones looked straight at her. If I must choose between reputation and truth, I'll let history decide which mattered more. Silence. Pure, electric silence. Then Jasmine whispered, maybe we're not on opposite sides after all. Jones gave a faint, wary smile. Or maybe that's what they feared most. By afternoon, the leaked documents began to circulate, and they told a story neither woman fully expected. The allocations were biased, yes, but not by intent. A decades-old algorithm had categorized districts by outdated census data. The bias was systemic, not personal. The failure wasn't of morality, it was of maintenance. When the report hit the media, the narrative flipped overnight. Commentators who had spent a week demonizing both women now called them the unexpected duo who forced transparency. Protesters outside the courthouse carried signs that read, "Truth wins when they stand together." Jones and Crockett fire and reason. Inside, Jasmine and Jones met once more alone. You took a risk, Jasmine said. You didn't have to. Jones smiled faintly. Neither did you. Jasmine extended a hand. Then let's make it count. Jones shook it. For justice, she said quietly. And for the first time, the gavel's echo didn't divide the room. It united it. A week after the courtroom doors closed, America was still talking. Clips of Judge Edith Jones ordering the release of sealed judicial documents and Jasmine Crockett's tear-streaked speech had gone viral across every platform. They were being hailed and hated in equal measure. The nation had split into two camps, those who saw them as heroes of transparency, and those who called it a betrayal of the institution. But for both women, the noise outside meant little. The real battle had already been fought, and neither of them had left unscarred. The marble steps of the courthouse glistened in morning dew. Jones stood at the top, her robe folded over her arm, waiting for the car that would take her to a private ethics inquiry in D.C. It wasn't a punishment, at least, not officially, but everyone knew what it was, a reckoning disguised as procedure. Michael, her longtime aide, approached. "They're not going easy on you," he said quietly. "I wouldn't respect them if they did," Jones replied. She looked out at the empty plaza below. "Funny, isn't it? The same people who accused me of bias now accuse me of weakness for admitting it might exist." Michael smiled sadly. "That's politics. You can't win by telling the truth." Jones sighed. "Then maybe it's time politics lost for once." The car pulled up. Flashbulbs erupted. A dozen reporters shouted questions.
"Judge Jones?
"Are you resigning? Was the leak real? Do you regret standing with Crockett?" Jones paused before entering the car, turned toward the crowd, and said clearly, "I don't regret standing with truth." It wasn't a sound bite. It was a statement meant for history. Across the city, Jasmine Crockett sat in a dimly lit news studio, microphone clipped to her lapel, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages. Her publicist whispered, "They're asking if you'll run for Senate after this." Jasmine laughed softly. "They always want to turn principle into promotion." The interviewer, a veteran journalist named Clara Trent, adjusted her earpiece and leaned forward. "Congresswoman, you've become a symbol. Defiance, justice, reform. But many critics say this was political theater, that your confrontation with Judge Jones was orchestrated." Jasmine's smile faded. "I didn't plan it. I lived it. The people I represent don't get to choose perfect timing or perfect tone. They speak when injustice leaves no silence left." Clara nodded. "And the judge, do you see her now as an adversary or ally?" Jasmine hesitated. "Neither," she said. "I see her as proof that truth can still change minds, even powerful ones. That's rare enough to respect. Some call it an unlikely sisterhood," Clara added. Jasmine chuckled softly. "I'd call it accountability. With empathy." The interview ended to a standing ovation in the studio. But behind the applause, Jasmine felt something else, unease, because that same night an email appeared in her inbox. Subject URGNT, committee motion from Senator Alden Reeves, the same Reeves who had moderated their hearing. She opened it. "Congresswoman, in light of your recent popularity, we'd like you to co-sponsor the Judicial Transparency Act. We'll brand it as a bipartisan initiative. The Jones-Crockett bill. It'll play well for both parties." Jasmine frowned. She scrolled down to the draft press release. Every paragraph twisted their story, painting it as cooperation orchestrated by leadership, erasing the struggle, the risk, the rebellion. It turned truth into marketing. She closed her laptop and whispered, "They're rewriting it already." The next day, a private letter arrived at Judge Jones's home. It bore the Senate seal. "Dear Judge Jones, we are launching a legislative effort in your name to promote transparency in the judiciary. Your cooperation would be invaluable to restore public trust." At the bottom, the same name, Senator Alden Reeves. Jones crumpled the letter. The hypocrisy was almost poetic. The man who once chastised her for losing control of the courtroom now wanted her name for his campaign poster. She dialed a number she hadn't used in days. Jasmine answered on the second ring. "Congresswoman," Jones said softly, "they're using us." "I know," Jasmine replied. "They sent me the same proposal." "Then you know what this is. They'll take what we did, strip it of danger, polish it, and sell it as virtue." Jasmine exhaled. "Then we don't let them." Jones's tone sharpened. "What are you suggesting?" "A joint statement. Unapproved, unscripted, unfiltered. Just us. We tell the country the truth, that this isn't reform, it's theater." Again, Jones hesitated. "They'll call it insubordination. You could lose your seat. And you could lose your bench," Jasmine replied. "But if we let them own our courage, what did we even fight for?" Silence lingered. Then Jones said, "Meet me tonight." The night was humid, the air restless with the smell of coming rain. At the base of the Capitol steps, two women met, one in a dark suit, the other in civilian clothes for the first time in decades. There were no reporters, no microphones, no aides, only a live stream camera Jasmine had set up herself, broadcasting directly to millions of followers across every platform. Jones took a breath. "Are you certain about this?" Jasmine nodded. "We started this in front of the nation. We'll finish it the same way." The red light blinked on. Jasmine spoke first. "Good evening. You know us? Or at least, you think you do. You've seen the clips, the headlines, the arguments, but what you haven't seen is how easily truth can be repackaged into comfort." Jones stepped forward. "They're calling it the Jones-Crockett bill, a name neither of us approved. It's not transparency, it's preservation of the same power that resists real change." Jasmine continued, "Justice isn't a press release. It's risk, it's doubt. It's standing in the line of fire when silence would be safer." Wood Jones looked into the lens. "If honesty costs our careers, so be it. Because the law, the press, the public, all of it, should serve one purpose only, the pursuit of truth." The live chat exploded with hearts, flags, and fire emojis. Viewers flooded the stream. Within minutes, it crossed 10 million views. Then came the part that silenced even the commentators. Jasmine turned to Jones. "You once asked me what happens when truth becomes spectacle." Jones nodded. "And I still wonder." Jasmine smiled faintly. "Maybe the answer is, when truth becomes spectacle, let it burn bright enough that the lies can't survive in its light." Jones's eyes glistened. "Then let it burn." They ended the stream there. No outro, no slogans. Just two women, standing shoulder to shoulder against a city built on compromise. 2 days later, the Jones-Crockett bill was withdrawn. Senator Reeves' press conference was canceled. And though both women faced official reprimands, public support overwhelmed any attempt at punishment. In homes, classrooms, and forums across the country, people began to talk differently about justice, not as an institution, as a choice. Jones quietly retired 6 months later, refusing every interview request. Jasmine continued her political career, but changed her approach. No more speeches for the cameras, no more choreographed outrage. Her next bill passed quietly, without fanfare, protecting whistleblowers from retaliation. When a journalist later asked her if she missed the spotlight, Jasmine smiled. "I didn't fight for the light," she said. "I fought for the space to see clearly." One evening, long after, Judge Edith Jones sat in a small diner outside Austin. She ordered black coffee and noticed the television above the counter. A panel was discussing "Woman Who Changed Judicial History." Her photo flashed across the screen beside Jasmine's. Jones chuckled softly, almost disbelieving. Then she murmured, "We didn't change history. We reminded it to listen." The waitress, not recognizing her, smiled politely. "You sound like one of those TV judges." Jones smiled back. "Something like that." And somewhere across the country, in her office lit only by the glow of a desk lamp, Jasmine read a letter without a return address. It contained only one sentence. "When justice and rebellion share a heartbeat, truth breathes again. E.J." She folded the letter carefully, placed it inside her copy of the Constitution, and whispered, "It was worth it." The story that began with conflict had ended with clarity. Two women, once divided by duty, united by courage. And though the court had long adjourned, the echo of their voices lingered still, in every place where power tried to silence truth.